The Week in Review with David Davis. Welcome to another Week in Review. This has been one of the busiest news weeks for some time, and it's not exactly been a news-free season. I've been running from pillar to post in Parliament this week on all the things going on. But before I get to that, one interesting thing. I voted for Rishi Sunak for leader because I thought he was the most competent operator. This week, I think it was Monday, but the beginning of the week, Delta polls showed that the Labour lead, previously 20 points ahead of the Tories, has halved to 10 points very suddenly. I think this is because of the way he's been presenting new policies, coming up with solutions to our problems. He is clearly an extremely competent, extremely conscientious and very capable leader, and that's beginning to show. But first, one of the biggest news items of the week was not directly from government. It was Baroness Casey's report on the Metropolitan Police. It was fiercely critical, with accusations of racism, homophobia, misogyny, and it came out at the same time as the House was considering or reconsidering the Public Order Bill, and in particular, whether or not we keep in place the expanded powers of the police, including the Metropolitan Police, to stop and search anybody in the vicinity of a demonstration, no matter whether they got any reason for suspicion or not. And as a result, I argued that perhaps we should think again a bit about this, and certainly take some time to think about how we go ahead with the stop and search, and whether we should, as Casey said, reset the policy in the light of what we know about the Met. I've spoken about the Windsor framework before on this channel. That's the framework, for those who haven't watched, of the end game of Brexit, as it were, with respect to Northern Ireland, which allows Stormont to say no to European legislation in Northern Ireland. It's called the Stormont break. There was a lot of press speculation at the beginning of the week. There'll be a huge Tory rebellion and so on.
The ayes to the right, 515. The noes to the left, 29.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Ayes to the right, 515. The noes to the left, 29. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock!
As it turned out, it got through easily. Over 500 votes to 29 votes, including the DUP, who we were, frankly, always expecting to vote against it. It will turn out to be a very good thing for Northern Ireland. Indeed, twice as many DUP supporters favour it, agree with it, as oppose it. So I think in due course it'll lead to the return of Stormont and proper progress on both Brexit and peaceful progress in Northern Ireland. And as if that wasn't enough news for 1 week, the week started with the budget. And literally almost as the Chancellor finished his debate, there was a banking crisis starting in California, rippling through other parts of America, and continuing into Switzerland with the Credit Suisse crisis. The Swiss government came up with a solution for Credit Suisse, one of the two biggest banks in Switzerland. And that solution was for another big bank, UBS, to take over Credit Suisse. This is a bit similar to when Gordon Brown forced Lloyds to take over HBOS to try and avoid a government bailout, but actually that damaged Lloyds and led to having to bail out Lloyds as well. So we're watching very carefully to see whether UBS can cope with this and handle it without any damage to its own capability. The issue of bank runs goes right back, well, most famously to the 1930s, the Depression then, but beyond that, it's been a long-running aspect of financial capitalism, shall we say. Back in 2010, I chaired the Future Banking Commission at the request of the then chairman of the Treasury Select Committee of the Commons. And what was very clear to me was that bankers have a very short memory. They make the same mistakes over and again, or similar mistakes over and again. This time, the government has been able to staunch the problem in Britain with the British branch of Silicon Valley being sorted out, sold for £1 to HSBC, and we've got to keep an eye on it. It will limit what we can do in terms of cracking down on inflation, because the more we put up interest rates, which reduces inflation, the more risky it is for some of the banks that have maybe made rather bad bets. But this is what I had to say in the Commons.
In my view, it's going to be incredibly difficult for the banks to get that balance between inflation and growth right now that their hands are tied by the instability of the banking sector. And so my one line to the Chancellor is, please look for the next budget at much more growth.
Yeah.
As I sit here, it is the 3rd anniversary of the government pushing through the Commons in one day the coronavirus emergency bill. Because of the sort of panic-stricken nature of the issue at the time, every newspaper had splashed headlines on the front pages about the threats and the infection risks and lockdown and so on. The opposition went along with the government when they put this emergency legislation through. Only a few of us objected, mostly pointing out that the science was unsound. The word I used was fragile, that the economic impacts of potential lockdowns and the social impacts were completely unpredictable. And of course, that's turned out to be true. So what we're going to see in the coming weeks, and I may well talk about this again, is a great deal of review of whether lockdown worked, whether the Swedish approach, which seems to have been the best, is the best way, whether the operation and decisions were made on sound scientific basis. All of the Matt Hancock WhatsApp files will have an implication there, and what we should do next time. All very important stuff, and important to do in a measured and sensible way. And now for our technology section. Technological forecasts are difficult, obviously, at the best of times. But the most difficult thing about them is to get right when they're going to happen and how big they're going to be. And that's true whether it's AI or drones or whatever. And some years ago, I think it was the head of Amazon, was forecasting that, our skies would be full of drones delivering parcels. Well, that hasn't quite happened yet. But what has happened is a dramatic new use for drones, namely delivering medical supplies. Medical supplies, by definition, are often very urgent. If you've got diabetes and you need your medicine in a hurry, that's an urgent thing. Or you've got a heart condition, you need your medicine in a hurry. A company called Zipline, with a drone called the Zip P2, has instituted medical supply arrangements in 3 American states and a number of other countries, mostly in Africa. This may well be a big leap forward in drone use, because in order to make it work, they're going to have to get the navigation, the safety, the organization of this right. And if they do that with medical drones, they may find that facilitates moving on to drones for many other things. One of the novel characteristics that makes this Zip P2 drone work is, as it were, a mother drone, which hovers above the location and uses a smaller drone to take down, a smaller droid, I guess, to take down the package to the target delivery point. An interesting and clever way of getting through some of the problems that drones face. As well as acting as a precursor for maybe a wider use of drones in terms of technology, it will also be a precursor in terms of regulation, because with a lower volume but very important purpose, we'll have to focus very carefully on making it work properly. And by doing that with this level of drone, we may well open up well thought through and fault-free regulation for future use of drones. Well, an extraordinary week, in fact, the second of 2 extraordinary weeks, with immigration policy, with policing policy we've talked about, with budgets, with interglobal financial crises, and of course, with not the conclusion of Brexit, but an important latter stage of Brexit. All these things have filled the week and filled the last 2 weeks, and I guess will continue to fill the future weeks. And we haven't even talked about Boris and Boris's select committee. Really important week. Thank you for tuning in, as it were, for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, please hit like, maybe put a comment below. See you next week.